planning for hiring and retaining, really important, a diverse newsroom team. So I want to introduce the host for this, Linda Shapley, who has had an amazing year. I've known Linda for years and have admired her through a really fantastic career. I think we got to know each other when she was at the Denver Post, and this year was hired as the new publisher for Colorado Community Media, which is such an, I know, it deserves a round of applause. Thank you for that. Yes. And this is and I'm going to use the word experiment because they are really doing something new and different there. And Linda is leading the way and transforming 24 newspapers that are mostly suburban to Denver, but really all along the Front Range. 20% of them are rural. It's a wide-ranging company and doing something that hasn't been done anywhere else in the country. So I will let her talk a little bit about that, I'm sure. But I just want to hand the mic over to Linda Shapley. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much for coming. I think that for so many of us, hiring is top of mind in terms of what we need to be doing as an organization. And I was so happy and excited that I was going to be able to moderate this panel because I have a lot of questions. So I want to make sure that I'm doing all the right things when I'm helping to create the newsrooms at our community organization that will eventually someday become the farm team for Colorado journalism. That I feel like that there's a real opportunity where I'm catching journalists, emerging journalists, as they're coming out of college, and that I want to make sure that I'm doing right by them. So I'm going to go ahead and get started real quick. First thing I want to do is we have an amazing panel that I've talked with them and have heard so many great insights, so there'll be a lot of things for us to use and to understand about what we can do to create these newsrooms that really reflect our communities and are responsive to our communities. So I'll start here with Marla and move down to have them all introduce themselves and also to provide us very quickly with their best hiring tip. So go ahead, Marla.
Hi, I'm Marla Jones-Newman. I'm VP of People and Culture at Mother Jones, and I am currently looking for editors and political and climate reporters, as well as having remote internship. That's my tip.
Hi, I'm Claudia Fernandez. I'm the HR manager at Rocky Mountain Public Media. I think my tip is train your managers on how to interview for a diverse panel.
Thank you. I'm Alfonzo Porter. I'm the Director of Student Media at MSU Denver. And my tip is build relationships with us.
Hi, I'm Carol Wood, COO at the Colorado Sun. And to Laura's introductory point, everything's an experiment. So my hiring tip is to experiment, and right now I want to use the services of the gentleman on my right and do national searches for diverse hires.
Thank you, Carol. Hi, my name is Calvin Parker Jr. I am the Community Media Operations Director. I know that's a mouthful. I oversee our radio platform, which I'm proud to say is a only Denver station that's 100% local content. Sorry, shameless plug real quick. And then I'm the project manager for the Open Media Career Engine. And the tip would be, of course, come talk to us when you're ready to hire.
So thanks. And I also have used Calvin and the Open the Career Service Engine. It's fantastic. So it helps so much in terms of like, putting very concrete goals in place of like, here's how we do this and here's what has come and everything like that. It's fantastic. All right, so I'm going to start this off by kind of saying, when we're talking about diverse newsrooms, essentially we're talking about recruiting, we're talking about retention. And so in my mind, that's how we set up this conversation of how we go. So I'll bounce around between, among all of you. And then we'll finish up as we kind of go through this time, which will go very quick. So recognizing the importance of diverse perspectives and identities. So what should newsrooms do to prepare to be a safe, supportive workspace for the more diverse teams that they hope to hire? So that's the question that I'm going to start with. And I'm going to start with Marla here to just talk a little bit about like the work that she's done at Mother Jones to kind of get it set up that way.
Right. So one of the things that I think is really important in this work is to realize that you cannot hire yourself out of diversity issues or problems. You have to do the pre-work. So at Mother Jones, we've been spending a lot of time talking about the culture and what it means to have a psychologically safe environment for BIPOC candidates to work in. This is the reason I'm focused on this. I had a conversation with a BIPOC candidate and asked, how did you get your last job? And they told me, someone called me. Okay, I still went through the process. But when that person called, what they did was they said, this is a safe place to work. When Claudia talked about training, that means training your managers about what it's like to manage people of color, what it's like to communicate and do active listening. So the training that I have implemented and created at Mother Jones, it's the normal manager training, crucial conversations, emotional intelligence, respect in the workplace, all the things we've been doing for thousands of years. But the change is it's through the lens of diversity. So when I talk about respect in the workplace, I give real life examples of my microaggressions. I say, when someone pitches a story and a white cisgendered male says, that's a stupid idea. As a black woman, I will never, ever, ever, never say back to him, you're stupid. I am never comfortable enough in an environment to say that to someone with that much privilege. So I also do training on staff to talk about someone else needs to jump in who has that similar privilege. To say, that was dumb for you to say, that's not the right thing. Let's talk about your idea. And then I go back, because this happened, I go back and discipline the person who said it. Right? First warning, do the progressive discipline, go through training, because I never say you have to change behavior without giving you some tools to get better. Because the conversation is, this organization is an anti-racist organization. If you can't do this, then is this the organization you belong at? And I have had, as everyone on this panel has said this, if you're truly an anti-racist organization. So hiring someone, which is great, you have to do it, I get it. But if you're really talking about being a true anti-racist organization, you have got to do the pre-work to make sure that this organization is safe for BIPOC people to join. So when I make the call to a BIPOC candidate, I am basically giving them my word. This organization is safe. It's not perfect, and it is safe, which means if someone makes a comment, that was a stupid idea for a pitch, it will be challenged, it will be disciplined, and we will have some serious conversations about it.
Right. I think that's an excellent point in terms of where we all need to be. In terms of that's the expectation that we hold among all of the people that we work with, and that people would come to expect. This is how I need to make sure that I'm being open to everything that's being discussed. So that's a really good point. So then I'm going to talk one step before that in terms of before even initiating the hiring process, we've talked about the culture in the newsroom. Carol, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the Rise and Shine, which talks about essentially that group of applicants and where we might be seeing some of those candidates, even knowing that we exist.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, so 2 years ago at the Colorado Sun, I launched a program called the Rise and Shine journalism program. And the inspiration for it came from CoLab and the CoLab Voices project, where I attended the Latinx voices, the Black voices. There was an LGBTQ, AAPI, Native American Voices project to better teach journalists how to interact with the folks that we report on in all the varied communities in Colorado and beyond. And the one theme that I came away from that with is we need to move our recruiting processes and our internship processes back. Like, starting with college interns, for us, it appeared, is not enough. And so we started this program, and I enlisted the help of our education reporter, Erica Brunlin, who has really helped me with this initiative. And we, once a month in July, let me rephrase that, once a year in July, we have a week-long program for middle school and high school students, so 13 to 18-year-olds, where we'll do a virtual program, instructors from all over the Colorado media landscape, TV, radio, print, and digital. And my concept is, as a youth, as a 13 to 18-year-old, if you like to play video games, we can find a spot for you in journalism. If you like to talk to people, we can find a spot for you in journalism. If you like to write poetry, if you like to write prose, we can find a spot for you in journalism. And so to help these youth think about their interests and their skill sets and how we can parlay them into a future in journalism in Colorado and beyond. And our focus is BIPOC and LGBTQ plus youth. And we had in our first year at least one student who did decide to enroll in a journalism program in higher ed because of the Rise and Shine program. We had another high school class that reached out to some of us at the Colorado Sun and asked us to help them preserve their high school newspaper. So we've been working with them for about a year. And so the idea is that if we can educate and train and gain an interest of these young people, then in 10 or 15 years, we can change the landscape of what media management looks like in Colorado. Because if we really do say we have a problem with what media management looks like, and I believe we do, the time to change that was yesterday. And I did have a little bit of pushback within our team saying, we need to wait until we can do these projects in person and bring kids into the Denver metro area and put them up in college dorms. And I do want to get to that point, but I also was not willing to wait to just start this process, because I think it's something that if we want to change the face of journalism down the road, we need to start with younger people now. I'm happy to answer any questions about that program.
Thanks, Carol. I mean, that's so key. I mean, how I started in this business, I was not a journalism major. I was intending on going into broadcast, and so I had gone into a different realm. And I started at my college paper, loved it, realized I was home, and so stayed at that college paper. Then when I went looking for internships, I came to, at the time, Cap Cities ABC, which owned newspapers, and I managed to make it into their minority internship program. So I got to go to Fort Worth and Texas, but that was the thing that helped propel me forward in terms of like what I can do. And so having that kind of that support early on in my career was critical in terms of where I could go. So I think those are the things that are really important. So Alfonzo, just from where you are with schools and universities, so what are they doing to diversify that pipeline for new journalists by creating, the more equitable apprenticeships or those sorts of things?
That's a great question. We are in this role that I play as the director of student media. we're being very intentional about who it is we recruit. And the good news is that there is tons of interest in this profession. As I go around campus and I'm speaking to various classes, we are being truly overrun with students walking in the door, literally overrun, and we just don't know what to do with them, because we get a first semester student saying, I've really been thinking about doing this, but are there any jobs available? And I want to be an anchor woman, or I want to be on the radio, et cetera. And so we are seeing the vast swath of ethnicities coming through the door. And so I want to report that not only is there tons of interest, but the interest spans all races and ethnicities. And, I think that's a very good sign. Right now, and I guess for me, I'm more the feeder system for your organizations and newsrooms, and that's exactly what I want to be. I've got 2 students now desperate for internships. The general manager of our TV program can't find an internship. The news editor for our newspaper can't find an internship. So I'm arranging internal internships for them, bending the rules a little bit, so that they can actually work in our newsroom and satisfy their internship credit. And so there is no lack of talent, and there is no lack of interest in this profession. And what they do know is that the landscape is changing so dramatically. They know that the newspaper that used to hit the front porch is no longer going to essentially be there in a few years. And so they're very digital minded. They already know that digital media is the way. So they're trying to get into it right now. And there is tons and tons of interest. And so to the greatest extent possible, I think people like myself at universities are the focal point for those folks who are trying to find diverse talent and secure that talent and to retain them. I love what Marla said about making sure that this is a safe environment. Those microaggressions, you're going to run these folks out of your newsrooms if they don't feel as though they belong there. If they're made to feel some kind of way because they're LGBTQ or because they're black or because they're trans or whatever the case, you're going to run that talent out. That's not what we're looking at. We're just looking at raw talent. And I think that her point is exactly what we need to hear. Make them feel safe and be mindful of their mental and emotional state and well-being.
Thanks, Alfonso. So, that really goes well into that next conversation, which Calvin, I want to ask you the question of what does it take for an organization to run an equitable hiring process? I'll just say for my own, what have we gotten wrong up to this?
Well, before I get into the actual career engine portion of it, I want to just go back to what Marla said, the legwork of making sure you're ready, that you do have an inclusive company culture. You have to ask that question that, do we, as an organization, have a culture that not is only inclusive, but people can be authentic when they come in the doors. They can be themselves. If you're answering no to that, then you have work to do. It's time to have, and I heard this, so many times yesterday, it's time to get comfortable with those uncomfortable conversations. So before we even begin coming to us for the career engine, that's truly, you have to look at your organization. I truly believe that. But once you think you can answer yes, and it's a journey. It's not like you're going to get it done in one day or one session, right? It's going to be ever-changing. The feedback, you want to get the feedback from all of your team members, diverse group members. You want to be able to implement changes that will help, build that inclusiveness. Does that make sense? Okay, sorry. But from there, when you get to the career engine side of it, our main goal of this is just to give you more diverse candidates. We basically become your hiring service or your HR department for the hiring service, so to speak. So we have a 7-step process. You come to us, you give us your job description. We will help you rewrite it. We want to make sure it works. Some of the tips I would give is, make sure that you're not delineating between, make sure you delineate between must-have and nice-to-have qualifications. Get rid of that gender code language. Make sure that You know, you're not alienating any potential candidates from diverse or underrepresented groups. I mean, those are just a couple of the tips of things that we would do with it. But from there, once we get the job description done, then that's when our ladies put in the legwork. We have Samantha here and Jenny, who are AmeriCorps Vistas, and they do an amazing job of, because this, you know, a lot of these newsrooms don't have the resources to put in this kind of time. We understand that. They're small, grassroots organizations. So for a free service and what we put into it, they really do an amazing job. And it's basically they'll compile all the applicants, they'll put them on a spreadsheet for you, they'll rate them for you. I mean, this is time-consuming stuff to have to do. And they'll put it all in a nice package for you so you can just review your candidates. Second part of that is most organizations maybe post it on the mainstream. You know, your main, your Indeed, your LinkedIn. You know, we'll post it in up to 20 job boards that women, people of color, are more apt to see it. We want to make sure you get that diverse candidate pool. And then you can make a decision. You know, we're not going to tell you who to hire, but we want you to be able to make an informed decision and have the right pool of candidates for it. And hopefully you can find some good candidates in there. You know, we can't guarantee that, of course. But at the end of the day, that's what the career engine is about. And it's not the solve-all by any means. You know, you still have that inclusive factor. You still have that equitable factor. We understand that. But diversity is a big part of it. And I think that's a good part to start with change. If you need more info on it, please, sorry, I'm long-winded. Please contact me and we can set up a meeting. Me, you, Jennifer, and Samantha can set up a meeting and give you more info on it. But that's in a nutshell what we do. Questions? Did I get it all out there?
That
I think
was
so.
great.
Okay.
So, Marla,
Thank you.
one of the things I want to circle back on is that, you know, in terms of Mother Jones, like say you've got, you know, your slate of candidates that have come in for a position. So in terms of the hiring process, when it gets to that point, what does that look like in the organization that might be through that equity lens?
Sure. So at Mother Jones, you know, we post jobs, like Calvin said, all over the place and go for niche places. So there's the National Association of Black Journalists and NAHJ and AA, yeah, you know, yeah, all of those. So when they come in, we're all the letters. So one of the things that's important at Mother Jones is that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, because that's how we phrase it. We have to have metrics. You have to inspect what you expect, okay? So one of our metrics is that in our first wave, 30% have to be BIPOC, 30% have to be women. If we do not meet that measurement, we still keep going to the well and still try to get more candidates to apply. Because if you don't have some metrics, how are you going to hold people accountable? How are you going to get things done? Even with those metrics, it doesn't mean that every hire is a BIPOC candidate, but we have at least made the effort and tried to get qualified people in. One of the other great things about Mother Jones is that we have freelancing opportunities. So when someone is maybe not chosen for a specific job, we have really in-depth questions. We don't send you an email that's like, thanks for applying, and that's it. Oh no, it's very thoughtful. It's, have you thought about freelancing? Have you thought about, we're gonna post this other job, we're gonna keep you in mind. So I create all these pipelines. Like, okay, I'm gonna keep this person because they may be better when we open up our racial justice position as opposed for my climate position or my political position. So it is a very thoughtful process. The other thing is when they come in, when we're interviewing, we have panels of interviews, right? Because a lot of it is making sure that the people you work with, that's a good fit. And I know that gets a bad taste in people's mouth, but get over it. It is reality, right? Sorry, I'm a little direct. But in the panel, there has to be at least one woman, one BIPOC person on the panel. That way, we are looking at these things through the lens. Back to Claudia's point about training. When you're training your managers on how to interview, you do training beforehand. So I'm really big on prep before you get into these processes. You've been trained on unconscious bias. You've been trained on inclusive hiring and how to do behavioral interviews before you're even allowed to be on a panel, before you're even allowed to talk to a candidate. I have to, because again, remember, I'm putting my name on the line saying this is a safe place. It is a safe place even before you start. And then hopefully that carries over to when you start. But you really have to do the pre-work really before you go to Calvin, before you go to Alfonzo. You really have to do the pre-work. And then when you're in that room as a BIPOC candidate and I see that there are BIPOC people on panels and that's who I'm talking to, that also sends me a message, right, without having to say anything.
Right.
So when we talk about what's our recruiting process like, there is a lot of work that had to happen prior to, before I even get you in the door to start having a conversation with you.
Yeah.
And then just want to add, looking at your salary bands. I've done a ton of work about compensation and reviewing and make sure that we are equitable in our pay, right? And making sure we're making offer letters that we are being fair as well. Because, back to Calvin's point, when you're looking at those job descriptions, women will look at a job description, and if they can't do 100% of the must-haves, they won't apply. Men, 70%.
Yeah. That's a really great entry to where Claudia, where I'd love to have you come in on this part of the discussion, because at where you are at Rocky Mountain Public Media, you've talked a lot about all of these issues and really helped that organization come through on how it's, hiring and evaluating and, every other part of that process. So,
Yeah, for us, it really starts at the top, from our strategic planning down to our performance management. So we have trust as our North Star. That's part of our strategic planning process, and that goes for internally and externally. It's publicly facing, but it's also internally about how we treat each other, to create that culture of belonging and respect that Marla was talking about. So we have stated values, and we have a lot of values-related conversations. I'm sure maybe too many values-related conversations, but we provide a lot of open spaces for support for people to talk about our values, to give examples about how to embody our values, and those we hold people accountable to those values. So every quarter, we set quarterly goals, and one of those goals has to be a values-related goal. And each of us does one value per quarter. So if one of our values is actively engage multiple perspectives, for this quarter, we're all going to work towards that value. So we try to hold each other accountable to our values internally. We also have the expectation for DEI to be a part of your job and your performance. It's a part of our job description templates. It's embedded into all of our roles. So if you're not engaging in lunches, trainings, or anything like that, it's now a performance issue, right? Because we're all trying to achieve that culture of respect and belonging. We also dismantled the annual review in favor of a continuous feedback cycle, meaning check-ins, one-on-ones, just constant conversations, so that we can have that continued conversation if those expectations aren't being met. How, as a person of color, do you tell your manager that you're uncomfortable? Are you going to wait for the annual review, or are you going to have consistent check-ins every week to be able to say that? And it allows for that incremental innovation so that folks can succeed incrementally rather than that pressure to have that annual review. And lastly, we do a deep dive into psychological safety at each of our quarterly engagement surveys. For example, last quarter, we did a discovery project for psychological safety, and we ran some surveys and some focus groups and came up with staff recommendations for our next steps. That can look like anything from senior leadership 360 reviews to senior leadership lunches every month to cross-pollinate what we're doing with each other, down to cascading communications plans to make sure that folks at the team levels understand what's going on at the top levels, and of course having conversations about culture ongoing all the time. So trying to create those open spaces and letting people know that those expectations are clear.
Thank you. That's amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
I love the idea of what, sorry, I'm loud. I love the idea of mechanisms for employees to be able to talk about their managers. I sometimes fear, though, that especially for BIPOC employees, that could be difficult, telling them to their face. So one of the things that Mother Jones has started is that we have a mechanism where you can do it, you have the option of being anonymous, and it goes to HR. So that there's more freedom, because there's a fear that when I criticize, let's say, a white cisgender male, I can be labeled as the angry black woman, and that trope comes out. So we created something more anonymous, and it comes to me. And then I phrase it in a way, but it doesn't, and then I, from an HR standpoint, we can then coach managers from that standpoint. But I really like everything you're doing, because we've done the same thing with regards to, in performance reviews and in job descriptions, there are diversity goals, and if you don't meet them, then I'm having some serious conversations about, is this really the place you need to be?
Right. You know, and where it comes so often is from, we need to establish a foundation of trust. You know, we're talking about trust among our communities, but if we haven't established that, you know, expectation in our newsrooms or in our companies, then it's the same, you know, it's the same result where you're failing when it comes to DEI and belonging. So I think that that's something that's really important. You know, and generationally is one of the things that I think about. You know, when I came into the business, it was very much a place where we were hard charging, cursing, drinking, you know, and that sort of thing. And that there would be screaming matches in the newsroom, and there would be people who were arguing about the intern, which was me, and so, like, you know, well, the only person we have to send out is the intern, and said in that way where it's kind of like, why would I want to stay here? Why would I want to stay in this environment where you already feel like that? And so I think that those are the kinds of conversations that we have to get away from, that newsroom is a relic of the past, you know, and that we need to be more, you know, just more inclusive and more thoughtful about how we approach things. And I applaud future generations, for millennials and Gen Z, for making us live to those expectations. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I have a thought to, you know, what Marla said about pipeline, and Alfonzo with placement, and Calvin with recruitment. And one of the things that I notice is if you have a management team you know, your interviewing panel is all of a certain ethnicity or all of a certain age range, they tend to go to the well that they know. And so they will not necessarily think about even when we do the DEI training, which we have done. I'll just use the Colorado Sun as an example. You know, we do the DEI training. We have the internal DEI committee. We do the work with internal and external diversity and equity and inclusion policies, and still need to be reminded and need to remind our management team that when they are interviewing people and looking for interns, that, you know, Alfonzo and Metro are just down the street from us. We don't always have to go to the Ivy League colleges for our interns that our management team comes from. And so that is something that I work on at the Colorado Sun, and I think to Marla's point also with HR and the comfort level of being able to have, especially your younger staff, and we have a lot of young staff and we have a lot of diverse staff. And you are correct, Marla, they're not always comfortable bringing up the issues that they observe with their direct manager. But they can come to me, and, you know, I am the middle-aged white woman, even though I am LGBTQ, they still can come to me, and I can take those issues to our senior management and to our ownership. And so it provides a conduit. And so I think it's important in whatever organization you have to have a conduit where those young folks can go to And then I can try and be a voice of reason and perhaps a conduit for change for some things in a, in a nascent news organization that's breaking new ground and also learning as we go.
No, I totally agree. I think it's extremely important that you build the trust. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just loud. I totally agree with both you and Claudia about the trust factor. And so when I'm talking about the pre-work, it is creating the trust. So the reason I'm really big on this psychological safety, and as you can see Claudia is too, is because when I talk about Mother Jones, I can talk about the great work we're doing now, whether I'm an employee, where I'm in management, wherever. Because I've had people come up to me and say, I heard Mother Jones is pretty light. And we all know what that means. And I've looked at your masthead and it looks, I understand. But let me tell you, I get it. We used to be, but now, because I'm there, we're doing this, and this. You have to tell the story. But to Claudia's standpoint, you gotta figure out how to cascade that down so everybody knows. I am huge, as you probably can tell, about over-communicating. So I have meetings, I have a newsletter, I have an intranet, I talk to every person who self-identifies as BIPOC, LGBTQ+, or any other marginalized group at least once a quarter. Because I need to get ahead of if there's any issues. So the reason I'm doing a microaggression training next month is because I heard it from one of my BIPOC employees that it's still happening. And we really need to talk about what is a microaggression. I hope everyone who's in this room knows what it is, but asking an LGBTQ person who identifies as a male and asking them, so which one is the man in the relationship? That's a microaggression. Touching my hair without my permission is a microaggression. Calling me the name of another black woman in the organization is a microaggression. And those happen every day. Going up to one of my brown-skinned employees and saying, "Do you speak Spanish?" is a microaggression. Hey, you know what else is a microaggression? Everyone in management going out golfing and they don't ask me. Because guess what? I golf. And I had to call out this is at another job, not Mother Jones, because obviously we don't believe in golfing. It's a total waste of the environment. But I had to call out my general manager and say, you guys all go golfing on a regular basis. You have never asked me. And he just tried to backpedal. I golf. My husband and I both golf. Why would you not ask me? And I let him suffer in silence. And then I said, next time you go golfing, you're taking me. Proof, just so you know, beat the hell out of all those guys, too. Had a point to prove. But, so we've got to build those trusts. And as Claudia said, you have to delegate this down in a cascading manner. So that everybody knows, because everybody is an ambassador for your organization.
Sorry, I just want to add a couple things. That was great, Marla. I want to back up to the process of creating that inclusive culture when it comes to DEI. I had a few conversations yesterday, and this question was actually brought up more than once, was, do you need a budget or funding for DEI initiatives? After explaining what we do at the Career Engine. And me personally, I'm just going to say, no, you don't. Research over everything. Research over everything is what I believe in. And with that said, we've got to do some amazing training. Martin and the Maynard Institute, that's where I learned about microaggressions. And the crazy thing about it goes both ways. We had to take a step back and look at ourselves. And being a black man in America, I've went through it, as we all have, Russ. Yes, so taking a step back and looking at my biases and some of my microaggressions against others, it goes both ways. So with DEI, it's it's, yes, definitely if you can get amazing training like the Maynard Institute, that's great. But I'll give you an example. My wife works for a huge hospital group in town, and their initiative there was 2020 was DEI. That's what they went in full strength for, and we're talking thousands of employees. My wife is white, half German, half Italian, so I don't win any arguments, but we have conversations on this, and some of their DEI work, I'm sorry, it's just missing the mark, and they have a huge budget. I mean, right? They've got funds on top of funds. So if you're a small grassroots, if you're a small organization, that shouldn't be an excuse. We don't have the time. We don't have the resources. I'm sorry, it floored me that,
There was something said yesterday in the keynote where they were talking about, well, my story got put off because of, and so essentially somebody rightly said, prioritize. This is a priority.
This is a priority, right.
And whenever we're talking about DEI, it's a priority to make sure that, we are dedicating, even if we don't have a giant budget and we don't have an HR department, that we're still finding a way to prioritize what are we doing to make sure that people feel like they are part of this organization and inclusive. And so, that goes to that point.
Yeah,
exactly.
and again, I've lived by the code of treat people how you want to be treated, give respect to get respect. But doing that Maynard Institute sessions was a nice look at myself. So the last point, was I think every team member should have some type of DEI training, because no matter how down to earth you think you are, no matter how woke you think you are, it ain't it. I'm sorry. So that's all I got.
No, thank you. So we're coming close to actually kind of wrapping up. I didn't know if anybody had any questions that they would want to kind of ask as we, wrap up things. Laura? Yeah, come to a mic.
I know we're recording this because there are so many things happening simultaneously. We want to make sure that people who couldn't come in for this. Sorry, I'll get over here. Here's my question. Those of you who are in town know that there's been a lot of discussion and difficulty among some news organizations in how they are treating existing BIPOC employees. And so I would love to hear you all talk a little bit more about the importance of, we touched on it with the importance of, being in a safe space, but really some concrete ways that managers might not think about what they can do to make places more welcoming, to help encourage and foster people's careers. And because it's one thing, it's kind of table stakes, it's kind of the basic foundational level to be a safe place, but what can managers actually do to make it a place where people are thriving and advancing and all of the things that we want employees to be able to do?
Well, and I'm sure Claudia was going to talk about this, but during the performance review, we do a lot of, great question, thank you. We do a lot of talk about career pathing. And when you have an HR department, they can do the training, obviously. But talking about what do you want to be when you grow up? And then sharing those opportunities. And even if you're a small organization, right? Because you're like, well, I can't afford to pay everybody, and I can't afford to everybody being a senior editor because that means more money. But have you looked at stretching their responsibilities? Have you looked at job shadowing? Have you looked at, there's so many things you can do to make a career interesting, intellectually stimulating. Secondly, one of the things, if you as an organization could pay for someone belonging to an NABJ, NAHJ, I always get the acronyms, but anyway, paying for those niche journalism organizations, AAJA has an amazing mentorship program. NABJ has awesome mentorship program, even for college students, right? So, and these things can sometimes be free. You're not paying for it. Also, Calvin talked about the Maynard Institute. Caveat, I am a current Maynard Fellow. It's free. They pay for me to fly to LA. I live in Denver. They pay for me to fly to LA. They pay for my hotel. They pay for my food. They pay for me to go to these amazing trainings. And they have all these different tracks. I'm in the executive leadership, but there's management training, there's storytelling, there's entrepreneurial. So a little research on your part coming to things like this and talking about that. So those of you who may not be familiar with Maynard, definitely talk to Calvin and I about those opportunities. But there's so much money out there. There's the Pointer Institute. There is the Diversity Pledge. There are so many.
Yeah, I'm a fellow for the Pointers Media Transformation Challenge right now.
Yeah.
And essentially, when I first looked at it, there's like a price tag of, $25,000. I thought, there's no way. And essentially, it was people advocating on my behalf, getting me a Google grant, and I'm there. And that's the kind of things where if this is something you want, you make the investment, you make the bravery to go through that process and then figure it out. And so
But
that's great.
As a newsroom, you have to support and give them time to do these things. So if I'm a 5-person newsroom, I don't have that kind of money. If you just spent a little time researching and getting on their blogs, they're sending them to you.
Right.
There's all sorts of grants out there to pay for the research you want to do. So how do we support BIPOC? One is this, right? But also supporting their dreams, asking for what their dreams are, and then supporting. If I'm sitting in a room and I'm telling my senior editor, I want to be an environmental reporter, but right now I'm doing social media, all right, let's make some time.
Yeah.
That doesn't cost you a dime,
Right.
but it will save you so much money in retention and engagement and just how happy people feel in the organization, which spreads across the board. Because one angry black woman will poison the entire newsroom.
Claudia, do you, or Carol, you've got.
I'm going to also do a plug for the Maynard Institute and CoLab, Colorado Media Lab, provided some funds for a lot of us to go through training earlier this year. And we at the Colorado Sun sent a small group through. I think you were in that group, and Linda was in that group also. Yes. And so that was fantastic. The other thing that I like to do, to Laura's point and question, for the young people in particular in our newsroom, and for a lot of young people who I mentor in this career path anyway, is make the point that everything in life is temporary. Every single thing that we are doing is temporary. And so while you are working at the current job you're at, whether that's at the Colorado Sun or anywhere, always be planning for the next thing. And so while you are working in this job, also make this job work for you. And I think that's kind of what Marla is alluding to also. Make the job work for you. Avail yourself of the training. Ask if you can have a membership to an organization paid for. Ask if we will pay to send you to a particular event, or if we can apply for a grant to send you to a particular conference. So, I do really like to tell young people in particular, do not get stuck in the mindset that you are going to be here forever, and don't get stuck in the mindset that that you are working for this job, because I want this job to work for you so that you can plan on the next thing, because there's always going to be a next thing.
Alfonso, Claudia, do you?
I just have a question. Obviously I'm not doing the hiring for the newsroom, but I am the person who's feeding and training up the talent for you. And I oftentimes wonder, exactly what is it that you guys need from me to what
Yeah,
I
we'll
mean,
be
I'm
going for another
serious,
hour.
because I sit around thinking, I've got all these great relationships within the industry, and I've got 75 students who are participating in our program right now, not counting the ones who are just walking through the door. who need opportunities. And so how can we make this relationship more effective to where we can feed the talent to you in a way that really works?
No, I appreciate the question. So one of the things I speak in front of, when I speak to students, I'm like, I'd like you to take a management class, because those who go through journalism school, and they go all the way through journalism school, they never take anything outside of journalism. But you want to be an editor-in-chief, and you have no idea how the business is run. You have no idea how to manage people. I would recommend you get some leadership opportunities so that you can learn how to manage people, but take a business course. Even if you're not going to write about business, take a management course, because I promise you, at some point, you're going to manage somebody. And even if it's just the intern, you still need to know what the crap you're doing. So I always recommend that they diversify their majors. I went to Loyola University in New Orleans, and they used to make them take a minor in business, because you never know. And it's better to be prepared than not prepared. The other thing is, you need to start looking at some critical thinking and looking at things very differently, because that is what the future of journalism is really going to look like. I need people who can pivot. One of the trainings I do for my managers about change management. It would be helpful if they came with that mindset. But please recommend, it doesn't have to be a minor, but please take some classes on the business of journalism, or at least a business class. You need to be able to understand how we make money so that you can pivot if we need to change things. Because I'm going to age myself here. If you think running a newspaper is like Lou Grant, where he's yelling at you and telling you what to do, check it in,
Yeah.
Google it.
Yeah. Go to YouTube.
Go to YouTube. It's that's my experience. But it is not. And you have to understand the business.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about your students understand digital. Do they understand how to monetize that? Do they understand what product development is? I know Carol can talk way more about this than I can, because I'm just HR. But I hope you notice, though, I know our business. If I have to know their business, and I promise you she knows her business, you need to know your business as well.
I can tell you that great journalists do not make great business people. You absolutely need to have somebody on that other side.
Right.
But you still need to know.
Right. And
You can come to me and say, I do great TikTok videos. How can I monetize that? Whether you're profit or nonprofit.
yeah. And great journalists don't necessarily make great managers either. I mean, I think that for the most part, I think I learned how to be a manager by not doing what a manager had done. And so it is that case of where, you gotta search out those opportunities.
And that's why Carol and I talk about training
Yeah.
all the time.
Right.
Because that's what we're doing.
So
just-
we've got about 5 minutes left, and there's another event in here after this. So
I just want to add, again, research. There's a lot of resources out there. We post all of our job positions with Eckerd Connect, and they have some amazing programs on the job training. They got work for pay. So I don't know how it would pertain to students, but if they have some type of job and they're looking at getting some skills, that's something to look at right there. That's all. I just want to include that.
So, Claudia, tell us a little bit about, when people are in Rocky Mountain PBS or, in public media, that kind of position has a little bit more of there's a technical skill aspect that needs to be brought in. How are you helping that access level that, for folks that perhaps had never been in, a studio before?
Yeah, we do some cross-pollination for sure for folks that want to learn more. You can shadow other opportunities, things like that. We try to engage and have cross-departmental meetings as much as possible. Something that Calvin mentioned is really think about what's actually required and what's just a nice to have. Sometimes all of those technical requirements aren't real. So really think critically about what the needs are.
I think that, I had mentioned this to Calvin, that essentially whenever we're hiring for somebody, we're always looking for the unicorn. And that's what our job descriptions look like. And it's like, but, you find people that are really great racehorses. And and that's the thing that we need to just make sure we're being really smart about how we do this. So I want to, give a hand to everybody who's been on here. And thank you so much. I think this was a really excellent discussion. So.